He stumbled into the Apache village as the sun bled over the horizon. His boots torn, lips cracked, and eyes wild with exhaustion. All he wanted was a corner to rest, a patch of earth to forget the miles behind him. But the women who found in him 3 widows cloaked in silence saw more than a weary stranger. They saw the answer to something unspoken that burned in their hearts. Their husbands had died in raids and sickness, leaving them bound to grief and empty huts. Yet when the pale wanderer collapsed before their fire, something ancient stirred within them. Tala, the eldest, watched him with calm wisdom, Nahale fierce and young with suspicion, and Oneida gentle-eyed with quiet hope. Their voices wove through the smoke, soft, secret, deciding his fate before he even opened his eyes. When he awoke, the air smelled of roasted corn and sage. His head rested on a blanket he didn't remember lying on. Tala handed him a bowl of broth, her eyes unreadable. "You may stay," she said, her voice steady as the desert wind. "But nothing here is free." The words chilled him more than the night air. He worked hard to repay their kindness, hauling wood, mending fences, fetching water. But each dusk, as the sun fell behind the red cliffs, the widows lingered near. They watched him with a hunger that wasn't for food. He began to feel their presence in every breath, every heartbeat. Their laughter haunted the firelight. Their silence was heavier than thunder. One evening, Nahale placed her hand on his arm and said, "The spirits brought you here for a reason." He didn't understand, not yet. He thought it was gratitude or perhaps loneliness. But their eyes told a deeper truth, one he was not ready to face. When the storm came, he took shelter in their hut. Rain lashed the walls and thunder rolled over the plains. Tala's voice broke the silence. "Our men are gone. You walk alone. The spirits have spoken. You will be ours." His breath caught. The firelight flickered, painting their faces in gold and shadow. He wanted to protest, but his words died on his tongue. They had given him life when the desert had tried to take it. In their gaze he saw no malice, only need, fierce, human and sacred. Oneida whispered, "You are not a guest anymore." And suddenly he wasn't. By morning he no longer felt like an outsider. He belonged to something wild, ancient and unbreakable. The widows had not trapped him. They had bound his soul to theirs in a vow older than law. In that desert home, he found what he hadn't known he was seeking. He came for sleep and found destiny in the arms of 3 women who had buried love, and now rebirthed it through him. The days after that storm felt dreamlike. The wanderer, once nameless and drifting, now moved with purpose among them. Tala taught him how to plant maize in the dry soil, how to listen to the wind for signs of rain. Nahale showed him how to track deer prints by moonlight, her fierce eyes softening each time he stumbled. Oneida, quiet as dawn, tended his wounds and spoke to him in words that needed no translation. Though he had not asked for this bond, he began to crave their presence. When he rose before sunrise, he heard their laughter outside, low and melodic. When he returned from the hunt, the scent of warm bread and wood smoke wrapped around him like an embrace. The widows no longer called him stranger. They called him our man. It was both a comfort and a weight he didn't know how to carry. One afternoon, he asked Tala why they had chosen him. She paused, her eyes lost in the distance. "The spirits took our men, but they left us breath. A house without a man is a wound that never heals." Then she looked at him, her tone softening. "When you came, the wind changed. We listened." Her words echoed in his chest long after she walked away. At night, he lay awake, watching the flicker of firelight dance on their faces as they slept. He wondered if this was love or fate's cruel trick. But then Oneida's hand would reach for his in the dark, grounding him in a truth he couldn't deny. Whatever this was, it had become his life. Weeks passed. The village began to whisper about the pale man who shared the widow's home. Some called him blessed, others said he was cursed. But the widows walked with pride, heads high, hands entwined with his. They did not seek approval. They had made their choice, and in their world the spirits had already agreed. One evening, Nahale returned from the river, her eyes glimmering with mischief. "You fear what you don't understand," she teased, pressing a hand to his chest. "But this is how we survive." He looked into her gaze, fierce as lightning, and for the first time he didn't resist. The walls between them fell, not with fire, but with quiet surrender. Seasons changed. The land turned golden, and laughter returned to the widow's home. The once broken women now sang as they worked. He built them a new shelter of cedar and clay, their hands working beside his. The desert that once tried to kill him had now given him life, family, and purpose. When travelers passed by, they saw something strange, a white man and 3 Apache women living in harmony. Some sneered, some smiled, but no one dared disturb them. The widows had found balance again, and he had found belonging. He no longer dreamed of the road. His restlessness had turned to roots. He realized the truth one morning when the rising sun lit the faces of his 3 wives. Yes, wives. He had not only found a place to sleep, he had found a home that breathed with him. Months deepened into years, and the wanderer no longer remembered the ache of loneliness. His hands, once trembling from hunger and exile, grew strong with work. Tala, Nahele, and Oneida became his world, 3 souls bound by loss but reborn through unity. Their home pulsed with laughter, with the smell of roasting corn, with the rhythm of shared breath and quiet trust. Each woman gave him something different. Tala, wisdom like cool shade. Nahil, fire that kept his spirit alive. And Oneida, gentleness that soothed his restless nights. He had not married them in ceremony, but the land itself had blessed their union. The coyotes sang at dusk, and the stars above seemed to guard their strange harmony. One cold evening, as the fire crackled low, Tala looked into his eyes and said, "You came to rest, but you stayed to live." He smiled, realizing how true that was. The man who once ran from pain had now built a world out of it. Every sunrise felt like a promise, every night a prayer answered. But whispers still came from beyond their village. Outsiders called their bond forbidden, unnatural. Some said he'd been bewitched by Apache magic. Yet when he looked at the 3 women who had saved him from death and given him belonging, he knew no spell was stronger than love born from survival. One day, soldiers passed near their land, and fear rippled through the village. The widows stood beside him, unflinching. "If they come," Nahele said fiercely, "we stand together." And he realized then he was no longer the guest, nor the wanderer. He was one of them, tied to the earth by choice, not chance. The soldiers moved on, leaving dust and silence behind. That night, under a blood-red sunset, he held his wives close and whispered, "The desert tried to bury me. You brought me back." Oneida pressed her palm to his heart. "No," she said softly. "You were meant to find us." Years later, children's laughter filled their home. The man with no name had become a father. The widows, once symbols of loss, became mothers, leaders, and keepers of an old truth, that love does not obey rules. It grows where hearts dare to heal. Travelers who passed by would tell stories of the white man who lived among the Apache women, how he worked their fields, sang their songs, and never left. Some called it legend, others called it fate. And as the desert wind whispered through the canyons, those who listened closely could almost hear the echo of their laughter. 3 widows and a man who sought only rest, but instead found eternity in their arms. Time rolled on like the wind over the dunes, smoothing every sharp memory into something sacred. The man who had once arrived starving and broken now stood as the quiet pillar of a family that defied both law and legend. His hair turned silver beneath the Apache sun, yet his eyes still burned with gratitude. Each dawn, he awoke beside them. Their children grew wild and strong, fluent in 2 worlds, speaking his tongue and theirs, carrying both his pale eyes and their mother's deep grace. When they ran through the fields, laughter echoing off the cliffs, it was as if the earth itself had forgiven the past. The widows, once outcasts, now walked with pride, respected as women who had rebuilt life from ruin. Sometimes he would sit by the fire with Tala, who still spoke with the wisdom of the ancients. "The spirits never make mistakes," she'd murmur, stirring the embers. "They sent you when our hearts were hollow." He'd take her hand and whisper back, "And they sent you when mine was lost." Nahale remained fierce, still teasing him with that half-smile that had once terrified him. Yet when the night grew quiet, she would rest her head on his shoulder, whispering stories of battles and survival. Her strength became the shield that guarded their family. Her fire never dimmed by time. Oneida's tenderness held them all together. She sang old songs to their children, her voice soft as rain on dry soil. When he fell ill one winter, it was her touch that brought him back, her faith that kept the fire burning when his breath grew weak. As the seasons turned, they buried none of their love, only the years behind them. And when the man finally felt his body grow heavy with age, he called his wives to his side. "I came here for sleep," he said, his voice trembling with memory. "And you gave me life instead." Tala wept silently. Nahel turned away so they wouldn't see her tears. Oneida pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "Then rest now. We will dream beside you." When he passed, the wind rose, carrying dust and song across the desert. The three women sat together, heads bowed, but not in despair, for love that had been born in hunger had ended in peace. Years later, travelers still spoke of the hut beyond the ridge, where three Apache widows once lived with a pale stranger. They said his spirit still walked there at dusk, smiling as the firelight flickered. And if you listened closely to the wind, you could still hear their laughter, echoing through eternity, in the place where he came to rest and found forever instead.